Oh, that's new. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of Construction Cast. This week, we're going to be taking a look at race and diversity in the construction industry. Thank you for joining us. Just before we get started, the usual kind of housekeeping. Anyone who has any problems, do drop an email to stuart@lionsade.com. The next episode will be on the 8th of July. We're going to be looking at expert witnesses, and we've got John Delaney from Base Content and Eamon Conlon from Conlon Law joining us, and there will be one more speaker, hopefully from Secretariat, joining us as well. Just before we start, we are recording this session, and if you want to see any of the previous sessions, they are on YouTube. You can search Lionsade Construction Cast to find them. This week, to welcome our speakers, I'll introduce them. We have Diana Chrouch, who is the director of Chrouch Consulting and an experienced marketing consultant who specialises in creating diversity and inclusion strategies. She is the chair of Diversity and Inclusion Committee for the Worshipful Company of Constructors and is special advisor to the All-Party Parliamentary Group for BAME Business Owners. She is also the national policy lead for Black, Asian and minority ethnic businesses for Federation of Small Businesses. Alan McKenzie is an experienced project manager specialising in professional services, including procurement of sub-consultants for large security-driven complex projects, administration for NEC-free contracts, project management and engineering services for historic public buildings. He sits on the CIOB's London Hub Committee and heads up the Regional Diversity Steering Group. Bola Abisogun OBE is a Fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. He was appointed as chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission in 2010 to lead the Construction Leadership and Diversity Forum. Bola's principal objective is to promote the construction sector and the surveying profession and increase the retention of ethnic minorities within the sector in the UK. He currently chairs a unique pan-London project called Moving On Up, a multi-million-pound initiative supported by the Mayor of London. In recognition of his efforts, Bola was awarded the OBE for services to diversity and young people in the construction industry in the 2019 New Year's Honours List. Theresa Mohammed specialises in contentious construction and joined Trowers Hamlins in June 2010. She was admitted to the Bar of England in 2005 and qualified as a solicitor in 2007. Theresa is the chair of the National Association of Women in Construction and was awarded Best Woman in Construction Law at the European Women in Construction and Engineering Awards in 2017. So we're going to start off this week a little bit about the COVID situation. As we usually do. We're not going to talk much on it this week because we have talked about it a lot over the previous weeks. Theresa, we'll start with you. Over the past weeks, we've talked a lot about the positive aspects of being able to work from home, and we might think that will increase going forward. But do you think this could be a disadvantage to women in the industry as they're more likely to do the childcare and request flexible working as it is?
Well, I think the issue of the restrictions that have been imposed since March is really that all parents whose children would ordinarily be in nurseries or schools have been presented with two challenges. The first is trying to work effectively at very short notice, and the second is trying to do that while juggling parenting, homeschooling, and domestic chores. And of course, finances are also irrelevant. So if you're not a very high income, you can't just create yourself a fully functioning home office and buy yourself new office equipment. Endless supplies online and so forth. And internet may not be, up to scratch. You may not be able to afford to get internet great. So you are therefore at a distinct disadvantage. Now you undertake, the lion's share responsibility. Chores are a significant disadvantage in the workplace at any event. But of course, this comes in when this all has to be formed at the same time as we home. However, what this period has shown us all is that work from home at short notice can actually be done successfully. So requests for agile working and flexible working shouldn't be met with suspicion as it has in the past. And I think it's also shown us, certainly in construction, that we need to use technology as a forward to enable people to work without all this necessary commuting and international travel. And in turn, people make so far as say that the concept of the office is dead now. It's been a catalyst for permanent change and working practices.
Yeah, great.
Hi, Annie. Are you
Is she dropped off?
There she is.
I'd forgotten I'd turned my mic off. Apologies. Sorry, Alan, coming back to you. Boris Johnson recently said we need to celebrate the positive things that have happened. Should we be more positive, and is there a lot to celebrate?
I think there have been positives. I'm going to read out a few that I've experienced myself. Obviously, the flexibility of working from home has been a massive advantage for business continuity, but also engagement within the office. I'm spending more time with families, connecting with old friends. But I tell you what's been very interesting for me, which I have found positive, especially talking to clients and project managers on the work I do, is it has got more personal. People are asking about how you're doing, how you're getting on, and we've gone a bit further than talking about work. And I think that's a positive thing. I'm not sure if that's everyone's experience. But for me personally, hearing nature and we often neglect a lot of things that are around us on our doorsteps, our neighbours, even within our communities. I've seen a lot of goodwill, and I think outside of this discussion, just the widest answering the question, I think there has been some positives, and I think that's something that's worth celebrating. On the flip side, and this is the bit that does concern me, is that mental health and well-being at this time, particularly when people are isolated, I think everyone needs to address and certainly have companies checking in on their staff, whether they're working or furloughed. I think that's really, really important. And I would encourage everybody to reach out, not to talk about work necessarily, just, a catch up 10-minute call like you would maybe have if you had a coffee break at work. So maybe there are some things that we can do that will help us through this time. Now, obviously, we're coming to the end of COVID-19. Things are starting to ease up, but I'd say some positives, but there are other areas that I think that are concerning.
Absolutely, it's been really up and down. Moving on from COVID and starting to look at race in the industry, Diana, we'll start with you. With so few Black and ethnic minorities represented in the construction industry, are we failing to design cities and public spaces that reflect the communities that live and work in them?
Well, I think a really good place to start is to talk about the fact that there are only 6% of the people working in the sector from a BAME background, and we know that there are only 1 in 8 women working in the sector as well. And when we start to look at leadership positions, the figures are even lower. I think for me, a key place to start would also be looking at what happened in Bristol a couple of weeks ago when, the Black Lives movement demonstration sort of had a surge, an uprising, and they pulled down the statue of Edward Colston. And I think that crystallizes how I feel there is a sort of a disconnect between the idea that there's inclusion in the construction sector and the way that minorities feel marginalized and excluded from the decision-making processes that is part of the construction sector's system, way of doing business. And, it's not because I'm advocating lawlessness, nothing of the sort. I just thought it was an interesting case study of the way that minorities feel marginalized and disempowered, really. And if you consider in the 21st century that minorities, the descendants of slaves, are expected to feel comfortable in an inclusive community with a statue of a man that was responsible for the death of 18,000 people and traded in 84,000 people. I mean, it's unthinkable that should be okay in an inclusive sort of a community in a public space. And, I actually think it speaks to the way that placemaking and neighborhood development policies are executed in neighborhoods where, we find that there is what I call gentrification segregation. Now, there's a mouthful for you, where, minorities simply do not feel as though they have a voice in the communities where they live, and anything can happen. And tragically, we saw with the Grenfell Tower tragedy. 72 people died, and this was on the back of the local authority deciding that Grenfell Tower was an eyesore and it needed to be beautified, and so they put cladding on it, which the residents were against, and which they lobbied the managing agents and the local authorities about, and were ignored. And so I think the construction sector has a long way to go before we can truly talk about inclusion.
Alan, what are your thoughts on this? How can the built environment become more inclusive?
Annie, I'm going to refer to some of the experiences I've had with generally large practices. I work for BDP now, but I've worked for other practices. And one of the things I have been encouraged by is the creation of workshops and forums within the workplace. Encouraging participation, expression, opinions and views, I think, across the whole of the practice, and not with just senior leaders or the design principles, I think is really important, especially if you're going to foster an inclusiveness in work. And I think through dialogue and engagement like that is where innovation and formulation of ideas come from. The creation, we're talking about designing here. Designing me personally, I think it's better to have those forums and those debates and those workshops, and there's no reason why any company couldn't do that. Bring people together. It could be in a lunch break, it can be set time aside, but it's getting value and job fulfillment and feeling part of something. And I think that's an area where I would like to see encouragement.
Absolutely. Having a look at law, Theresa, last week some figures were published by the Times that said only 756 of partners at the Magic Circle firms in the UK are black. Law firms and construction firms are all adding their voices to those publicly supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, but are they doing enough, and what more can be done?
Adding vocal support by Matter campaign is important because it confirms organisations standing with the black community and are outwardly anti-racist. However, the lack of diversity is present in all sectors, including the legal sector. And what previously done is things like, for example, at my firm, Trowers, what we've had is an initiative called Trowers Includes, which is meant to draw together all the networks, including with an effort to share our passion for diversity, educate the workforce, the government policies, and everything about the importance of diversity and why we need to foster and encourage it. But it's quite clear that we ought to go a lot further than that. And I would say that, an obvious place to start is by reading the Black Letters at Work open letter of the 22nd of June. This letter is so powerful, and basically what it's about is turning all the statements of anti-racism into positive action.
Seems like we're losing it, Theresa. I think we're losing your connection. Perhaps we'll come back to you in a second at that point, and we'll just quickly go on to Bola and say, Bola, it seems that those who are interested in supporting diversity events and attending them and working towards diversity in the workplace are those that are underrepresented in the industry. How can we encourage those in a position of power to believe that diversity is their problem to tackle as well?
Well, thanks for the invite, Annie. To me, it's very simple. There is a business case, and I'll refer to the business and the community fact sheet that is publicly available. The first question is, why wouldn't you want to become more diverse as a sector? And, I turn the conversation into a commercial one, recognizing that all businesses are in business to make a profit. I normally refer to profit with purpose. But to do that well, you need people. And your people need to feel valued and included, ideally. And historically, that's been a problem. So to demonstrate, to Alan's point, Theresa, and dare I say Diana's point, you are a better employer if you have a diverse talent pool. And the fact is we have a shrinking talent pool because we have a huge swathe of individuals who are aging out and therefore can no longer participate. And you've got a younger generation coming through who are saying, actually, we want to be part of this thing, but not in the way we sit and feel. But if you talk about innovation and creativity, which actually is the key component post-COVID that's going to permit you to continue to participate competitively, you need different kinds of people around the table. So this is no longer a choice. This is a business critical agenda that you need to address as a business. And I would urge more people to use their voice. Now, I won't say more than that because it's been previously stated already on this call, but fundamentally, leadership, by its own definition, has to lead this conversation. And if it's uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable. But it's going to be mission critical to surviving post-COVID. And I'll leave it there for now.
Diana, I'll come to you on Saturday. Sorry, we'll see if we can get Theresa back. Theresa, a lot of the industry groups are kind of recognised as kind of old boys club. And, what could they be doing to encourage a more diverse membership?
Annie, can you hear me okay?
You're dropping in and out.
Okay.
Perhaps
we'll
try and get Stuart in the background to get Theresa on the phone, because it might be a little bit better that way, and we'll try back in a second. Diana, what are the Worshipful Company of Constructors doing to encourage more diversity?
Well, I mean, to pick up the point that you just addressed to Theresa about the sort of old boys network, I mean, I am a member of the Worshipful Company of Constructors, which I joined about 3 years ago now, and I've been quite impressed with the efforts that they have made to improve the representation of minorities and women amongst their membership, because it very much felt when I joined that it was an old boys network. And we've done all the usual things. We've got a policy and a strategy and so on. But I think the key difference for me was the commitment from the leadership, from the master of the company, totally behind inclusion, diversity and inclusion, and wanting to, and they accepted targets. So they accepted that we were going to aim within a year to increase the representation of BAME women and so on and so forth. So that was quite impressive for me. They also recently signed up to a diversity charter, which is a London-wide charter that we're trying to encourage other livery companies to sign up to, so that they too can look at representation from minorities. But one of the key strategies that we've used to improve representation amongst the membership is outreach. So we work, for instance, last year we had an event called the Ladies Takeover of the City, and we worked with the National Association of Women in Construction to raise the profile of the Worshipful Company of Constructors, and to make it perfectly clear that the livery companies are a gateway to running the City of London, and that we need more women and minorities to be involved in that. So literally reaching beyond our networks, so that we can encourage minorities and women in. And I think that's a really good blueprint. It's a really good model for other organisations to follow. Not just have a paper policy, actually put some targets on it and make it and make the organisation, make the business accountable.
Okay.
Thanks, Dana. We're trying to get Theresa back in on the phone, so hopefully we'll get to ask her those questions again. But just move on for now. You're not afraid to call people out when you see a lack of diversity, and I've seen you. I've been aware of many times where you've offered people support and helped to change that. But you're now in a senior position in the industry. Do you think that helps? And what advice would you see to people perhaps a bit further down, earlier on in their careers, who see their organisation and their company need to do better, and how they can push them to do so?
So I'm sorry, I didn't catch that question. Can you repeat it, please, Annie?
The question's for Bola, and it's about how he's now in a senior position, so it makes it slightly easier to call people out on their lack of diversity. How can those lower down and earlier on in their careers call out, perhaps if they see their company or organisations they're with need to do better?
So this, and I'm humbled by your reference to a leadership position. I still consider myself as a ground worker, always building. So, I'm humbled by that. But, to your point around seniority and young people, and it comes down to their voice. But I point the conversation really to leaders. And, I don't want young people or younger members of the professional sector to think that they don't have a voice. Part of the challenge at the moment is to tease the conversation. And I think young people and others just need to be bold. I've just been bold. I've been shot down for it on occasion, but I've had a voice and I've used it. And I think leaders need to acquaint themselves with that uncomfortable era of thought and thinking, and need to be vulnerable to some of these conversations that are more demanding of what the status quo is prepared to give in terms of a response. And I think at the moment, I've never seen as much energy in that conversation as I have. And as a leader, I would always mandate that people be themselves and bring their whole self to the workplace. And that means not internalizing things that you don't agree with, not internalizing things that cause you distress and harm. And to Alan's point around mental health and well-being, this is the reason why the property sector and construction sectors have such a high rate of mental health. Is because many of the individuals internalize stuff for too long, and leaders need to reach out. This is a two-way conversation. It's not even optional. It's mandatory now. It needs to happen. So in the interest of everyone in the professional sector, we really need to be bold. And young people, I think, have less tolerance for that conversation being pushed or kicked down the road, which is actually quite refreshing.
Absolutely fantastic. And yeah, a similar topic came up when we was looking at mental health a few weeks ago. You know, the lack of diversity put up as one of the issues in the industry. Hopefully we've got Theresa back now, and we can come back to Theresa on that question on industry groups.
Hi Annie, can you hear me?
Yeah, much better.
Oh, thank goodness for that. Sorry, I just wanted to add that point, that it's really important that everyone has a look at the Black Solicitors Network and their open letter. I don't know if that was cut off before. That was in relation to the previous question about what law firms need to do. This is very similar to what I think industry groups need to do, which is they need to urgently review who is part of their membership and the diversity within their own membership. And then they need to engage with groups like the BPIC, the groups we've been hearing about today, and actually try and figure out what they need to do as part of their membership offering to attract a more diverse membership, and how to foster and mentor those members when they decide to join. And I think a really important thing that I've raised on a number of occasions is we need to critically examine the kind of events we put on and what we actually do as membership organisations, because a lot of them are tailored towards activities that will automatically be prohibitive. And I think we need to really look at that carefully and make sure that diversity is a consideration when organising all events, all panels for speaking, all outward-facing things, who we put on websites and in what prominent positions they are, candidates for, senior positions within the membership organisations. All of that kind of thing needs an urgent review. And that's something that we need to be doing now.
Yeah, and that brings us on quite nicely to a question we have for Alan, is about imagery. And do you think that makes a difference when companies have pictures of diverse people on their marketing materials, their websites, or how do you feel when you see a lack of it?
So Annie, and I'm sorry to sound critical here, but the picture that you did post, I asked the question: does it represent a face of many colours to create harmony or alienation? Now, when I look at that picture, it doesn't relate to me at all. I don't look like an alien, because it does look very, very alien. And I think maybe that's a mixed message, because no one wants to associate themselves with something that's outside society. And I think if we're going to create a norm, what we should do is we need to identify protected characteristics, champion role models, celebrate success. And the way to do that, I think, is, so this one thing we're not very good at in this country is celebrating success. If we can target the champions and the role models of the future, that's where we should be aiming, and not come up with this image of a multicolored person, because I'm sorry, but that I can see Bola's nodding, and I think he's nodding in agreement here. It's not something I can relate to. I think back to the United Colours. Anyone old enough to remember United Colours of Benetton? And that was all about branding and marketing. But you had everybody in the picture all wearing funky clothes or whatever. But what it was trying to do is represent the differences. So let's celebrate the differences instead of merging everyone into one look, because we are all different, and diversity and the differences that we have in our lives. It's not just in work, it's in our home life, it's in our culture, it's in our heritage. These are the things we should celebrate. And I have seen brilliant examples of that over the years. I remember going on a building site and I saw a container, it had a prayer room. It had all the prayer times for Muslims if they wanted to take time out, have a prayer. It was all there. The times were there. They had a space to contemplate, all the rest of it. Brilliant. You know, they're celebrating that. And it's little examples like that, I think, can go a long way, actually. In terms of, I just wanted to drop on to another, just very, very quickly regarding race. And this is something obviously, and it's close to home. My soon-to-be wife is black. One of the things that she is very upset about is that certainly with what's been going on, we've got to stop associating black people with trauma. What we need to do is start looking at positives. We really need to start looking at the positive side of life, not the negative. I just wanted to drop that in.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah.
And Diana, coming back to you for those of us who are white and want to support our black colleagues and our peers in the industry and in our personal lives, is there anything? What should we be doing? You know, it's a difficult question to phrase, but you know, how can we do better, and what are the best ways that we can be supportive to our colleagues?
Well, I mean, I think there are several layers to that, and I suppose on a personal level, I suppose owning a position of privilege, having the courage to be able to do that on a personal level is quite a difficult thing to do. I mean, I've had conversations with white friends of mine about their ability to accept that in our society, having a darker skin may mean you have just simply less privilege. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. It doesn't matter what position you have in society. But having a darker skin can be a great leveler, what level of achievement you are at. And so being able to accept that you have a position of privilege, and that means power, and with that power you can bring change. I think that's a really great place for allies to start. And to refer again to what's happened with the Black Lives Matter mobilization, international mobilization, I think it's a brilliant case study for anyone that's seriously interested in allyship. That at the end of the day, fundamentally, we're all human beings. There isn't any other race other than the human race, actually. And I find it really interesting that we're still talking about race in the 21st century, as though if you're a different shade, you can be a different kind of a race. And I think that's the starting point. I think for the construction sector, what I would like to see is people in leadership, in real positions of real power, seriously taking a knee, sitting down with their minority staff, reaching out to organizations that represent minorities, women, and so on and so forth, getting under the hood of the car, understanding what the issues are, and coming up with an action-led response to that. So we're not talking in the same way when my daughter is my age. I find it really sad that we are, I watch my parents struggle and that we're still here with a similar struggle. We have these conversations in cycles and we're not moving on. And I think that the power is within each and every one of us to sort of basically, as I say, symbolically take a knee, come together and agree an action plan and take that forward. So that, in 2 years, 5 years, we're not just looking at only 6% of the construction industry being BAME and 1 in 8 being women. And I think that's the answer, is that we all individually need to take personal responsibility.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. We're running out of time. We have got some questions come in, so we'll switch to Q&A mode. Bola, we've got the first question for you. Let me just turn the questions on. So how do you see professional BAME networks connecting and being facilitated?
How do I see professional BAME networks? On the connecting point, it's funny, I've had a conversation this morning. From Femi, fabulous. And hi, Femi.
Hi, Femi.
On the connecting point, we've got to put aside egos and just collaborate. I think one of the things where we failed miserably generally is collaboration. And as for being facilitated, I think platforms such as Annie's, I'm working on my own professional body, the RICS, I'm working with the CIOD. But you see, with all of these things, it's great, but you need the will on the other side of the table. We can come up with the best strategies and ideas, etc. But if we don't have the will on both sides, it's going to go nowhere fast. So really, what I'm saying is we need more collaboration. It's fundamental. It's the elephant in the room.
Absolutely. And all those groups and documents and all the things that everyone's about, we'll put all them on the blog post that we share afterwards as well. So you'll have access to all of these resources that we've talked about. There's a question here that says, is there a split of BAME representation? What percentage is Black, Asian, minority ethnic individually? Does anyone know that off the top of their head? If not, it'll be something we can look up after, I suppose.
Can I just say that it's 1.2% as of March 2016 in surveying? I think it's currently 1.4% BAME. I've challenged my own professional body on the split within that, but the figures are pretty dire in 2020. So it's not great in surveying.
So either way, it's low across the board. Diana, we've got a question for you. How do you believe the government could improve engagement with BAME professionals?
How do I believe the government could improve engagement with BAME professionals? Well, I think outreach. One of the things that in one of my roles, I'm actually involved in a public consultation for BAME business owners, and one of the areas of frustration for I think for BAME professionals, for BAME business owners, is that there doesn't seem to be representation at government level for our interests. For instance, with the response to COVID-19, there have been some issues with BAME professionals, BAME business owners accessing support. And there isn't an easy conduit, there isn't an easy way to approach government urgently with those concerns. And we feel as though it creates a time lag and a disconnect, so we just don't feel represented. And I think that what the government needs to do urgently is to look at outreach and proper engagement through outreach with organisations that represent BAME professionals. I mean, I think it's quite simple, it's self-evident.
Okay. And another question that's come in for you, Diana: how can events companies bring authentic issues of diversity and inclusivity, the creative agenda, when developing installation and events placemarking projects with developer clients? Yes. So I think.
Well, I mean, I think I sort of answered it earlier on when I said that I feel as though there's a problem with the whole structure, because the objective of placemaking and development projects is to, I suppose, generate income, generate money, generate profit. And so what they tend to do is to gentrify areas in a way that excludes groups that can't afford to live in those areas anymore. And so I suppose, a short answer is that we need to look at the way that the objectives of placemaking. I mean, I'm trying to find a sort of quick way of answering it. So, for instance, I mean, if a community engagement process does not properly include all of the stakeholders in that community, and they don't properly have influence over final decisions, the placemaking strategies aren't going to change. We're not going to find that, for instance, what happened in Grenfell Tower could still happen now. I mean, it could still happen again. If we look at what's going on with all of the buildings across the country that still have cladding on them, where we know that there's been open opposition and a big political debate about who's going to pay to have the cladding removed, but yet still we're here. There's clearly something fundamentally wrong with the objectives of these strategies, and I think that's the key. Is we need to sort of look at the entire system, root and branch, and that it's really difficult to just talk about fixing, events and installations and so on, because I just don't think it's going to change unless we have a root and branch change in the system.
Okay. And Alan, coming to you on this one, what should companies do to empower BAME staff within the workplace?
That's a very good question. From Tariq. I think I know Tariq from way back. Nice to see you, Tariq. What should companies do to empower BAME staff within the workplace? It starts with encouragement, mentoring. There are so many areas with leadership skills that can be developed. Mindfulness, understanding what microaggression is. Go to meetings, encourage people to speak, give them a voice. That's what anyone would want. Anyone would want that. They'd want that. It should be about job fulfillment, and it should be about really making a difference and contributing to the wider place within the workplace. All I can say is stay positive and get those companies. And this is not a radical approach. This is something it takes time. Start a diversity and inclusion group. Get people to have a voice. Get some of the senior leaders to hear them, and then start pushing them into positions where maybe they'll be an associate and a director one day, and maybe they'll be running the company. I think it starts with small steps. And I think if you work for an organisation that has that kind of vision, and just picking up what Bola said, I think it's vital for today, in the world today of business, that we do need to be seen as, I don't want to talk about tribalism here, but people tend to stick with what they know, and they'll align themselves with people that they relate to or whatever, but it's very narrow-minded. So I think they need to break that. They need to break that cycle. And maybe it's for the companies to deal with, not for people who are considered to be BAME. Because honestly, I think this is a white person's problem. It shouldn't be a black voice or someone from an ethnic other should be discussing this. It should come from the top. So it's the encouragement to talk about the value and the benefits.
Absolutely.
And I think that leads quite nicely into this next question. Perhaps Theresa, you can answer this. How do we convert the unconverted, those who don't come along to events like this typically, those that don't join in the situation, they think it's someone else's problem? How can we convince people and support them to get involved and be part of?
Is that question for me, Annie?
We'll take it to Theresa, I think, if she's still there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, Annie. I think one of the big problems that we are facing is that there is a widespread ignorance to this issue and these issues, and it is actually part of the problem, and it contributes to pernicious racism because there is so much lack of understanding about it. So I think personally, my own view is that training around diversity has to be mandatory within all businesses, because we don't know. There might be hundreds of allies out there that are waiting to be informed of what they need to do, and they just don't know how. They don't have the tools available. So I think our job is to educate them. And certainly with everyone that's been talking today, we are all so enthused and ready to act. We need to empower others to do the same, and that means working with the regulatory bodies, working with the Black networks, working with groups like National Association of Women in Construction, the RSES. We need to all draw together and try and solve this problem.
I totally agree.
And I think we're really running out of time. We'll take this one last question. And I'll throw this out to anyone in the panel. Are there any previous initiatives that have successfully increased BAME representation? Anything you've seen that's worked really, really well?
Well, I can interject. The Inquiry into Race Discrimination in Construction 2009-10 developed an action plan which became the Fairness, Inclusion, Respect to Gender, now gifted to CITB. So that's been really successful on a number of fronts. But as for pockets of excellence within firms themselves, I think they're all on a journey. They're having good and bad experiences, but generally, I think they're getting traction. But I think, the real issue for me is that we are, yet again, 26 years, my postgrad, we're having the same conversations we were having in 1994. And in 1994, we were talking about the same sort of initiatives. So something clearly isn't working. And I just think the conversation needs to be open and honest. I think the conversation has been had, but I don't think people have been honest. So we need to be honest and open and vulnerable to the truth, even if we don't accept it.
Thanks. Well, I think we're running out of time. We've gone a little bit over this week as well. Thank you so much to all four of you for joining us and taking part in this conversation. And hopefully conversations will continue. Would hopefully not for another 10 years, but we'll make progress. But thank you so much for joining us. We will be publishing a write-up, and again, like I said, all the details of all the initiatives and documents and reports and things that our speakers have mentioned, because there's a lot of useful information there that's been shared, will be sent out to everyone. Thank you all for joining us, and that's it for this week. Hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks, guys.